The Cincinnati Bengals might have walked away with a win over the Cleveland Browns, but let's be honest, this victory raised more questions than answers. Yes, the scoreboard shows the Bengals on top, but the way the offense played? That's a real concern moving forward. If this team wants to control the AFC North and chase a serious playoff run, they've got to clean things up, and fast. Before we dive into the latest breakdown and what this means for the Bengals' future, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and don't forget to ring the bell so you never miss fresh updates straight from Bengals Nation. Alright, let's get into it. Sunday's game had plenty of drama. The defense deserves credit. They stepped up in key moments and ultimately helped seal the win. But on the other side of the ball, things weren't nearly as smooth. After a strong start, the offense stalled. And when Cleveland's defensive front turned up the heat in the second half, Joe Burrow was under constant pressure, sacked multiple times on the same drive, backed up near the goal line, and forced to scramble just to keep the play alive. It was tense, it was messy, and it exposed problems that cannot be ignored. What makes it even more frustrating is that these struggles didn't come from a lack of talent. They came from execution, play calling, and adjustments. Zac Taylor and his staff are going to have to answer some tough questions, because relying on the defense to bail them out every week isn't a formula for long-term success. When we talk about the Bengals' struggles, Joe Burrow naturally comes up. He's had slow starts before, and this game wasn't much different. But honestly, the spotlight can't just be on Burrow. It has to swing back to head coach Zac Taylor. One of the most frustrating patterns with Taylor, dating back to last season, is his play calling and timing. There are moments where you can't help but scratch your head, wondering what the plan really was. What stood out against Cleveland wasn't just the play selection, it was game management. Miscommunication on the sidelines forced the Bengals to burn timeouts in situations where they desperately needed to hold on to them. That's the kind of detail you expect to be ironed out during preseason, where every snap helps build communication and rhythm. Yes, the starters got reps in August, but watching this offense, it almost looked like they hadn't. The most baffling sequence came late in the game. Cincinnati had the chance to control the clock, yet instead of keeping the Browns' timeouts intact and forcing them to work, the Bengals used one of their own. The timing made no sense. It wasn't a matter of physical talent, it was about organization, preparation, and discipline. In those final moments, the team looked scattered, as if halftime had knocked them out of rhythm instead of sharpening them. And in the NFL, those lapses can be the difference between holding on to a win and letting one slip away. If we're being honest, Zac Taylor has to wear a lot of the blame for how shaky this game felt. The Bengals should have had more breathing room against Cleveland, but questionable decisions on the sideline kept things far closer than they needed to be. Now, to be fair, nobody expected an easy day against that Browns defense. They're one of the most physical units in the league, and they proved it again on Sunday. Even with weapons like Joe Burrow, Ja'Marr Chase, and T. Higgins, nothing came easy. Every yard had to be earned. That's what makes this matchup so dangerous. Cincinnati will see Cleveland again in Week 18, and with the way the AFC North usually comes down to the wire, that rematch could decide the division. The Browns have shown they're not intimidated by the Bengals' firepower, and if anything, they seem to relish playing spoiler. And of course, there's the constant problem named Myles Garrett. Once again, he completely disrupted Cincinnati's rhythm. Whether it was collapsing the pocket or shutting down drives when the Bengals needed to drain clock, Garrett looked like the best player on the field at times. It's no secret anymore, for whatever reason, Cleveland's defense seems to have Burrow's number. Until the Bengals figure out how to solve that puzzle, every game against the Browns is going to feel like a heavyweight fight. The truth is, the Browns' defensive line completely dictated the flow of this game. From the very first drive, it felt like they were pulling the strings, forcing the Bengals' offense into uncomfortable spots and shutting down every attempt to gain momentum. When a defense is controlling where you go and how you play, you know you're in trouble, and that's exactly what happened here. The numbers back it up. According to Keith Jenkins, Cincinnati finished with just 141 total yards of offense, 95 through the air, 46 on the ground. That's the lowest output in 107 games under Zac Taylor, playoffs included. Think about that. With Joe Burrow at quarterback, Ja'Marr Chase and T. Higgins at receiver, and an offensive line anchored by Orlando Brown Jr., you'd never expect to see a stat line that anemic. But Cleveland's front made it happen. Burrow's day summed it up perfectly: 113 passing yards and a relentless pounding from Myles Garrett and company. The sacks piled up, the pocket collapsed, and even Brown, one of the Bengals' biggest offseason additions, got beat clean. That infamous series of 3 straight sacks? It was the kind of sequence that makes you wince as a fan. Yes, you can point to the offensive line needing to be sharper, but this wasn't just about one unit underperforming. This was about a defense that completely broke Cincinnati's rhythm. If the Bengals put up this kind of offensive showing again, no matter who's across the field, it's going to be nearly impossible to win consistently. This has to be a turning point, not a trend. Here's the bottom line: 141 total yards of offense simply isn't good enough. The Bengals managed to sneak out of Cleveland with a win, but it was ugly, and everyone in Cincinnati knows it. Yes, the defense carried the day, and yes, a win still counts in the standings. But if this offense doesn't clean things up, that kind of performance won't hold up week after week in the NFL. There were flashes in the first quarter that showed what this team can be. Chase Brown punching in a rushing score was a great moment, and early on, Burrow seemed comfortable enough. But as the game went on, the same old problems showed up: slow starts, lack of rhythm, and Cleveland's defense dictating the pace. It's become a trend that should concern every Bengals fan. Now, to be fair, we've seen this story before. Joe Burrow is notorious for starting seasons a little rusty, only to heat up once the calendar turns toward mid-season. History says he'll get rolling. But until then, the offense has to find a way to give their defense more support. That group deserves credit for bailing the team out, but they can't be asked to shoulder the load every single week. At the end of the day, the Browns have figured out how to frustrate this offense, and it's on the Bengals to deliver a counterpunch the next time these two teams meet. If Cincinnati wants to prove they're real contenders, they have to show they can adapt, take a hit, and come back stronger. The Bengals have to figure this out, and quickly. Yes, they escaped Cleveland with a win, and yes, in the NFL that's all that shows up in the standings. But let's be real, this team has far too much talent on offense to put up numbers like that. The film room will be busy all week, and Joe Burrow, who is known for his obsessive preparation, will be locked in. He can memorize formations, read defenses, and diagnose coverages better than almost anyone, but at some point, it has to translate onto the field. This offense is supposed to be the heartbeat of the team. The defense showed against the Browns that it can rise to the occasion, but that group can't be asked to carry the load every Sunday. The Bengals will face high-powered offenses this season, teams that won't be held to 20 points or less. And when those games come, Cincinnati has to be ready to trade blows, score for score, punch for punch. That's why it's so important for the passing attack to click again. Fans want to see Joe Burrow pushing the ball downfield, Ja'Marr Chase turning short passes into highlight plays, T. Higgins stretching defenses, and even young backs like Chase Brown adding spark on the ground. That's the version of the Bengals that terrifies opponents, and the version they'll need if they want to contend deep into the season. For now, it's fair to call this a shaky start. Maybe it's just early season rust. Maybe it's the Browns having a blueprint to slow Burrow and company down. Either way, Cincinnati has to prove they can adjust, counterpunch, and remind the league why this offense is one of the most dangerous in football. The next few weeks will tell us a lot about who the Bengals really are.